going?
Going.
Are we on?
We are on.
Alright. Okay.
Sure, Luke.
So, this is the warm compost. This is what it looks like on the inside. What it is it's actually two bins. This is the top bin, and this is the bottom bin. And,
aren't there actually 3 bins?
Well, yes, there are actually 3 bins. Good point. Those are the 2 bins that make sure compost, and then the third bin, the one that just collects water. Or worm tea, as some people call it. The water that gets collected in the bottom actually still has a bunch of nutrients in that, so you can use it to fertilize, to like put into your house plants and stuff like that, or even outdoor plants, whatever. And usually you want to dilute it pretty heavily with just water. I'd say something like a 1-to-4 or a 1-to-3 ratio, yeah.
So Luke, this is fascinating. Please explain how can I feed the worms so that they don't die?
Oh, well, that's a very good question. So first, the stuff that you feed them is any food scraps you have. If they're, as long as they're don't have any oil or any meat products, so that means even eggs or any dairy.
So the worms are vegan.
So the worms are vegan. Well, not only vegan, they also don't take oil, even vegetable oil. So any kind of oil. And then the other thing you want to avoid is you want to avoid too much citrus or anything acidic. You can put a little bit of it in, but so like if you have an orange, you can put the orange peel in if you have a whole bunch of other stuff as well, so that it doesn't become too acidic. But if you just have a bunch of oranges, if you just ate 3 oranges, you shouldn't throw that in there because that's going to be too much. The other thing you want to avoid is too much stuff that's kind of like spicy. In the general sense.
No Mexican food?
No Mexican food. Good.
Oh.
And actually not just Mexican food, but any kind of spices. So no garlic, or at least very little garlic. Same thing with the acidic stuff. Very little onions, and then like anything else like rosemary, sage, anything that makes those. If it's very fragrant, especially if it's very fragrant. So that's basically what you can put in there. But anything other than that, if you're cutting up vegetables for a stew, you can throw in all the scraps from the vegetables. You can throw in all the peels in, anything like that.
Whew. So now I have all this big pile of crap. What I do?
Excellent question, huh? So once you have the food scraps, if you're done cooking, or even if you store it, in winter you can keep it in a little Tupperware container or something, like a day or so, once you get enough. So, what you do is you put them into the bin, and you can decide which bin you put them in, either this one or this one, depending on what you're trying to do. I'll explain that later. If you look in here, you see 2 things. You see the already made fertilizer, and then you see the newspaper, torn up newspaper. So a very important thing is when you put the food in, make sure that you dig out some of the fertilizer, already made fertilizer. Put it in. Oh, you can see some of the worms already here. Put it in and then cover it up with the soil, because that's going to prevent bugs from coming, and it's going to prevent other things from happening, like for the food from rotting and making bad smell. The other thing you should always do is you should put in some newspapers. The newspapers serve 2 purposes. They prevent they prevent it from smelling as well, so they kind of keep the smell down, and they regulate the moisture. Or 3 purposes really, and they serve as bedding for the worms. So like the worms kind of like use it and eat it, and eventually the newspaper is actually going to be integrated into all of the fertilizer. Because the newspaper is going to be in the fertilizer, you have to make sure never to use any color newspaper. Anything color on it is not good because it's got many metals in it. And the best thing to use is newspapers because it's already it's like already recycled. Soft. It's not acidic paper, like a lot of white paper that you get in office papers is acidic paper, and stuff like that, so you don't want to use those so much. So that's what you do with the food once you get it. The reason is because, well, two reasons. One, you can fit more stuff in here. You know, there's two whole bins of compost. But the second reason is because then what I can do is I can decide to only put food in, let's say, the bottom layer. And then all the worms will migrate to that bottom layer where all the food is, and then they'll come get out of this top layer.
They're connected.
Yeah, so actually, bottom here, there's holes. Bottom. We can't see it because there's newspapers on it. Here, let's take some of this off. This newspaper. There's holes here. So the worms will. So, for example, the liquid will trickle down into the bottom, and the worms will also go down into wherever the food is. Right now, the bottom this layer is holding a slight smell to it, and that's because there's not very much newspaper there. And actually, for you to store it, I'm going to switch the layers for you. Awesome. Because this layer is newspaper, and it doesn't have as much compost, so this will fit better into it. So it takes a bit of space now. And then we'll just put some newspaper in here, and then it won't be much. So yeah, this top one, the one that I switched to be the top one, already has a bunch of, it's like this full. So you can actually start putting the compost, the second part of food into the second one, so the worms start migrating. And that's kind of the advantage of having multiple bins, because now most of the worms will leave this one and go to the other one, and then you can start using the fertilizer from this one. Because these worms actually shouldn't be outside. They shouldn't be. You shouldn't put the worms in the ground because they're actually not native to this part of the world. They're red wigglers, and they're from Australia. They usually will die over winter when the soil sort of freezes a little bit. But you still don't really want to put them outside. So that's why you want to try to get as many of them out as possible. The other thing you can do, they don't like light. So you can actually take the fertilizer, dump it onto a tarp, and then spread it out, and then they'll start digging into they'll go away from the top, and then you can take a layer off, and then they'll go again farther down, deeper, and then you can take another layer off, and so forth. You can do that too. And the way that you control the moisture is two ways. One, usually you don't have to make it more wet than it is, because if you're putting in fruits and vegetables, they usually have a lot of water, so that's usually going to keep it wet enough, but it could be too wet. And in that case, a really simple thing to do is just add more newspaper, because the newspaper is going to soak up a lot of that moisture, and then it's going to
Are there any alternatives to newspaper?
You could put things like no, not you can put things like dry leaves or things like that. Although newspaper is a lot better at soaking it up. One other thing I've tried before is coffee grounds, and they sort of regulate the moisture pretty well too. But you have to make sure that they're dry when you put them in there, because otherwise they might be moldy. You kind of have to mix them in with some soil. Let's see what else. The other thing is, so this bottom one gets filled up with water. So let's say you could leave this top where there's newspapers in here, right? You're going to start putting food into this second bin. If you see that there's a lot of water going in here, then you just have to dump that out, and that's going to regulate the moisture a little bit too. If you get rid of that water. What else?
Do I have to keep it inside my apartment or outside?
You don't have to keep it inside, but you don't really want to. Well, I mean, you do have to keep it inside your winter because then it will freeze, like I said before. And you don't really. You might not want to keep it. Okay?
So
You might not want to keep it outside if it's too hot. Usually they want to be between 70 and 85 degrees or 90 degrees. You don't want it to be too hot. And one way, and actually they can be lower in temperature. I've stored them in my basement where it was 60 degrees, and that's okay. It's not going to kill them, but they don't move as fast and they don't eat as much. So that's something to consider. If you're storing them in a cold place, they're not going to eat as much. Usually, what I've read online is that a pound of worms can be about 3 pounds of meat.
Wow!
So they can eat a lot of food. But if they're cold, they're not going to eat that much.
Now, the biggest problem is what happens if the girls start complaining. That's not complaining because there are too many bags in the kitchen.
Well, actually, if everything's going well, there should be no bugs. Like right now, there are no bugs in there. And so, like I said, one very, very important way to make sure that there's not going to be bugs is to make sure that all of the food that you put in there is covered with soil. So remember, dig out a hole first, put the food in, and then cover it back up. You want to make sure it's all covered up, and then add some more fresh newspaper just to make sure. You okay?
Bags. Yeah, no bags. Get outside, no inside.
So another thing to remember is to make sure to check the bottom bin and dump on, or like water your plants with that, because if you leave that water in too long, then that could get bugs as well. But if you do that, it should be okay. Another thing to remember or to look at is in this bottom bin, if there's worms, you might want to take those out and put them back in before you dump the water into your houseplants.
Can they live in the water?
Usually, no, not for long. They'll die eventually if they're in the water, but sometimes they crawl down there. So another thing is, if you see worms coming out, that probably means there's something wrong. It's either, most likely, it's either too moist, or they don't have food. Like if you've eaten all the food, and then they're crawling out, they might be eating food. But you can also check, like if you dig in, and check if they pretty much ate everything already, then you can put more food in.
So, Mr. Luke, please tell me, what should I do if now it starts to smell?
Well, remember, I mean, this is going to have the smell of sort of like soil. So, I mean, if you're not used to that, and like if you have it in your office for now, like that's pretty normal. So that's nothing. If it smells just a little bit, like right now, this thing smells slightly. This just needs more newspaper. Like it doesn't really smell that much, right?
Yeah, I would not eat that. It could be that.
Right. But it's not bad. If it smells really bad, like if it smells like rotting food, for example, then it could be a couple of things. One, it might just mean that you didn't cover up the food very well, so that it actually starts rotting, and that's also how you might get bugs. But another thing might be actually that if you put way too much food in there, and they just can't eat it fast enough, then some of the food might start rotting. And actually, to solve that problem, you can just not feed them for a little bit longer, and just add newspaper, because they will eventually eat it, and the smell will go away. And then the other thing is, I mean, if you're putting in food that's already rotting in there, then that's going to smell a little bit more. So I usually try not to put food that's already rotting in there, because it's already smelly. It's already gonna start smelling a little bit. But usually, if you just put too much food in there and start to rot before they have a chance to eat it, they will eat it eventually. But just add newspaper and then don't open the lid very often.
I've heard something amazing. What happens if actually some of the seeds starts to sprout and you have plants? Can you eat them?
I've actually seen that, yeah. And some of the seeds will start sprouting in there. What happened with mine was I just kind of, while I was putting more food in there, I mixed it in and they died.
Sprouts.
I did. Not on purpose. But actually, so if it's something that you know what it is, and it's something that you want to plant into your garden, you can just dig it out, you just take it out and plant it. It's not a problem. Yeah, you can definitely, that's fine. But this is just, and then if you just let it stay in there, then eventually it'll die because it's not getting any sun, and then they'll eat it. They won't eat it just like the rest of the food. So
isn't that amazing? New food from dead. Cycle of life.
Yep.
can say that.
If you have any questions, you can always email me or call. And remember, if you take care of your new pets, they'll provide you with a lot of good fertilizer.
So, Mr. Luke, please, what was I going to ask?
What should my post be?
I don't know, I like this one.
You're not thinking I should have.
Are you? I think she is.
We're just taking a video. Yeah. I think that's everything.
Cool, bye.